So many of us use Apple products every day in our lives, from iPhones to iPods to iPads and even Macs. However, the tech giant we know today has humble beginnings. From the creation of the first personal computer to fierce competition with companies such as Microsoft, this is the history of Apple computers. The company was founded on April 1st, 1976 in the Jobs family garage by two guys named Steve. Steve Jobs, one of the founders of Apple, was born in San Francisco in 1955 and was given up for adoption. He was an intelligent child, but had trouble conforming to the rules of formal schooling. He was so intelligent that in 5th grade, his teacher offered him a chance to move to high school, but his parents refused. Steve met his co-founder, Steve Wozniak, at the University of California, Berkeley. Steve Wozniak was the son of an engineer, and like Jobs, he was intelligent from a young age. Steve Wozniak found a knack from a young age for building electronics from scratch. On April 1st, 1976, the two came together to build Apple I, the first Apple computer. Steve Wozniak was the primary engineer for the Apple I. He received the inspiration for the computer from a local electronics enthusiast meeting in Menlo Park. He was inspired by the MITS Alter, which looks more like a box of lights on a circuit board than a computer. The MITS Alter came in a kit and was a kind of build-it-yourself computer. Wozniak figured that he could streamline this idea and make it a simpler product for the common consumer. So he produced the first computer with a typewriter-like keyboard that we see on most modern-day computers. This computer, the Apple I, is the archetype for every modern-day computer. However, Wozniak wasn't trying to reinvent the computer. He was simply trying to prove to himself that he could do great things, even with the little resources that he had. Surprisingly, Wozniak hadn't even thought of selling the computer. This is where Steve Jobs' marketing brilliance came into use. Through many deals with electronics marketers and local stores, Jobs created enough revenue to get the company off the ground and begin selling the Apple I. It originally released for $666, however it didn't sell many units. This limited their funds and halted the success of Apple. The first real success for the company came when the Apple II was released. The Apple II contained many new and improved features to the Apple I, thanks to the revenue of the sales of the Apple I. Instead of making wooden models by hand, Apple started to manufacture and mass-produce them. The Apple II contained a completely redesigned TV interface and eventually colored graphics. However, the funds were still a problem at this time. Many banks were reluctant to give Apple a loan because the idea of selling personal computers to the public seemed absurd at the time. Luckily, Steve Jobs met a man named Mike who gave them a small loan of $250,000. This is when the name for the Apple company came about. Many people wonder why the name Apple. What does a fruit have to do with the computer and technology empire? The name Apple was used because it precedes the name of their biggest competitor at the time, Atari. They chose Apple because the name showed up before Atari in the phone book. With a new influx of cash and newly designed computer, Apple started to take off. Millions of Apple IIs were sold in the 1980s, and by this time Apple had been around for 4 years, and people were starting to realize they might have something special. The Apple II was a well-known and well-made machine that allowed Apple to create a strong grip on the personal computer market. With their newfound status, Apple started seeking other opportunities. They saw the business market as a great area to venture into. They wanted to quote-unquote conquer the businessman. This was a massive failure. People saw the Apple III as the Apple II with a bigger price tag, since not many notable changes took place between the Apple II and III. Also hindering Apple's success was the introduction of IBM's first personal computer. This computer, which strongly resembled the design of the Apple III, was a huge success. Apple needed to bounce back if they wanted to stay relevant in the industry. They did this by, in essence, revolutionizing the way people looked at the computers. For the first time, they used a graphical user interface, known as a GUI. This is most commonly seen as the mouse on the screen on every computer we use today. However, because of the high price tag, it was fairly unsuccessful at the time. IBM had over 2 times the amount of sales as Apple, but this is when Apple caught its biggest break yet. The Macintosh 128K was introduced in October of 1983 and was most widely marketed in the famous 1984 commercial, which aired during the Super Bowl.
Today we celebrate the first glorious anniversary of the Information Purification Directives. We have created, for the first time in all history, a garden of pure ideology, where each worker may bloom, secure from the pests, obeying contradictory laws. Our unification of laws is more powerful a weapon than any fleet or army on earth. We are one people, with one will, one resolve, one cause. Our enemies shall talk themselves to death, and we will bury them with their own confusion. We shall prevail.
On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. And you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
This was only the beginning of Apple's road to success. With Steve Jobs reinstituted as the head of Apple, he ushered in a new era of innovation. Apple then introduced the first iPod and the iPhone, along with its successors, and up to the iPad. These were all stepping stones to the top, where Apple solidified their place as a world economic leader. They continued their revolutionary ideas, marketing strategies, and individualism with their most recent release of the iPad Pro.